probably tomorrow. I don't know what with.
Sometimes may be good, sometimes may be shit.
Thank you, Ruth.
Thanks, Kev.
Much love to you. But I am leaving now. Leaving on a jet plane? No, because I'm just going to go downstairs and get some food. I'll see you tomorrow. Thank you all for listening and watching. Free Palestine. No Pastor.
Sly Loris. Ha. Give me a second and I'll bring up my YouTube chat on the Simless Bastard. The last night of rancid farming. Let's see if we can get evidence of Julia Hartley Brewer being rancid. Yeah. Wow. All of you came in rather quick. Oh. Yeah. Give me a minute, Loris. Rejoice. Sly Loris is in the YouTube chat. In fact, you know what? I'm going to check something before going into my chat. I have ordered a mattress topper from Amazon. It's getting delivered by Every. Pure shit. It says it'll be when I ordered it, it said it'll be arriving on Tuesday at some point. Probably going to be stupid time, like after 6 or something. Because the last time I got something delivered by Every, it said the delivery slot was between 2 and 4. Turned up at 10:08. Because Every are shite. Hermes, what is your major malfunction? I swear to God. Right. Yeah. Hello. Track, please. God. Fuck it. See all updates. It's at the Carrier facility in Milton Keynes. I'm in Glasgow. I'm doubtful it'll get here on Tuesday. Did you? I've got games just now. I have. I get my money in 6. Don't know. I've got Pathologic Classic HD. That's the first one, and I've got Pathologic 2. I've played both of them, and now I'm waiting on the third one dropping, the 9th of January. Can't fucking wait. It is going to be amazing. Played Pathologic. Rather good games. What games did you buy? Did you get them cheap? Nice one. I hope you enjoy them. The favourite character through the playthrough with other pathologic people is the Haruspecs. Mine's is the Bachelor. I like the Bachelor better. God, it's on for an hour and a half. Yeah, fuck it.
The US government is tonight pursuing a third vessel off the coast of Venezuela in international waters in a further escalation of tension between the two countries. 2 oil tankers have already been seized by the US military this month, one of them yesterday. That prompted Venezuela to accuse the Trump administration of a serious act of international piracy. Joe Inwood has the latest.
That's an act of war, by the way.
Donald Trump had threatened a blockade of Venezuelan oil. It seems to be, at least in part, beginning. Late last night, in international waters, the US Coast Guard boarded a tanker.
Raptors played Silent Hill F. It looks great. I can't afford it. Well, I couldn't afford it when, back in the day, a few months ago when Raptor was doing his playthrough. Once I finish the games that I've currently got, it's going to be a while yet because I got Baldur's Gate 3 last month. I'm still struggling with it.
Tonight, confirmation of another operation, the pursuit of a ship said to be the Bella One, accused of flying a false flag. It follows another being boarded 2 weeks ago, all part of what the US says is an operation against narco-terrorism. Venezuela sees it very differently. Nicolas Maduro has accused the US of theft and kidnapping. Now, this all comes amidst continued US military build-up in the region, involving thousands of troops, an aircraft carrier, warships and fighter jets. They've carried out dozens of strikes against small boats they accuse of carrying drugs, although are yet to provide any evidence. There has been increasing unease in Congress about the legality of the strikes. For many who follow maritime security, there's little doubt about what's going on.
Look, I think it's very clear the US military build-up since August in the Caribbean is very much about putting pressure on Nicolas Maduro. You don't need a 100,000-ton aircraft carrier to undertake counter-narcotics operations. So it's very clear the US wants regime change, and that's what the military build-up is about.
At a regional summit, South America's 2 most powerful leaders clashed over the situation.
Os limites do direito internacional.
The limits of international law are being tested. An armed intervention in Venezuela would be a humanitarian catastrophe for the hemisphere and a dangerous precedent for the world.
Argentina saluda la presión de los Estados Unidos y Donald Trump.
Argentina welcomes the pressure from the United States and Donald Trump to liberate the Venezuelan people. The time for a timid approach on this matter has run out.
The US accuses the government in Caracas of using oil to fund what it says is a narco-terrorist operation. Venezuela says the US is trying to steal its natural resources amidst the rising threat of war. Joe Inwood, BBC News.
Fucking hell. Very dangerous game he's playing here. Yeah. Donald, you're a fucking psycho. Yeah, self-care is good care. We'll use that as a cleanse. But first... Oh, God. Oh, God. I missed some peak cringe last night on Raptor's channel. This still goes on now that the solar is way cheaper than... Yeah. Yeah, they are on the way. Sly Loris. Yeah. Someone needs to tell the Americans that. Oh dear God, no. No, I'd be sitting there yelling. Yeah, well, we saw what Raptor done. Seriously, some of them are bellends. Fuck. I try not to go into those places. The ever awesome Dargesh has educated me. Oh. I woke up screaming in the night when I had my gallbladder issue. Literally screaming. Super Hubby was good, but he had to call an ambulance for me. I got rushed to hospital. That was fun. I had to get my gallbladder removed. That pain was something else. Fuck. Oh, God. Oh, make sure you stay hydrated, darling. And if it gets really quite bad, like someone's stabbing you from the inside out, either go to casualty, or if you've got an out of hours or something, because you'll not be able to eat. You'll be literally doubled over in pain like I was. Oh, fuck off. No, I'm not doing her. I can't. I'm too she infuriates me too much. Huh. She might be doing most of the day. Time capsule. Ooh.
When we last spoke about Iran, we talked about the events surrounding the withdrawal of the Western and Soviet occupation forces in the post-1945 time period. This was one of the early Cold War confrontations between East and West, one where the Soviet Union failed to achieve its goal of gaining influence in Iran. While this may have seemed like a win for the West, at the time, the situation in Iran continued to be volatile, with a multitude of different groups vying for influence and control. Today, we're going to look at Iran under Mohammad Mossadegh and his ultimately disastrous relationship with the West.
Dan.
I'm your host, David, and this is The Cold War. That's
why I'm showing you British history. We have know your history, people. Know your history. Come to your lass. I can educate you. I'm a nerd. Kev's not a nerd. He said so. Says his political and slop streamer. Kev, you might be a little bit of a nerd. Just saying.
Let's get into what Iranian politics looked like. While pluralist in nature, that pluralism was being tested in the post-war period. The 1947 parliamentary elections were one of the first tests of that pluralism. Opposition forces accused Prime Minister Ahmad Ghavam of rigging the elections after Ghavam won 73 seats compared to the 25 seats won by the pro-Mossadegh forces and the mere 2 seats won by the leftist opposition. Sitting on the peacock throne was Mohammad Reza Shah, an autocrat by tendency who wanted to have more direct political control and felt that the best way of doing this was to decrease government dependence on parliament. The events of February 4th, 1949 helped the Shah towards this. While attending a ceremony in commemoration of the founding of Tehran University, a symbol of secularism in Iran, by the way, the Shah was shot at 5 times by Nasser Fakharai, a journalist affiliated to a religious newspaper, who was also a member of a union affiliated to the leftist Tudeh party. There was also evidence that Fakharai was a member of the fundamentalist group Fadayan-e-Islam. Somehow, the first 3 shots fired missed the Shah, while the 4th and 5th bullets wounded him, but not severely. Fakharai was killed by security forces on the spot. The Shah declared the assassination attempt was part of a conspiracy by communists and religious radicals, and declared martial law. The Tudeh party was banned, with 28 members of its leadership being arrested, including prominent members of the United Trade Unions. Newspapers critical of the government were also closed. This was also used as an opportunity to further expand the powers of the Shah by means of the passage of the 7-year plan through the Majlis on the 17th of February. The goal of the plan was to fight rural poverty and boost agricultural output. If successful, it was thought that it would win over the poor and prevent them from succumbing to pro-Soviet influence. The plan was ultimately unsuccessful, however, as the funding for the plan was redirected to industrial bailouts and the construction of new rail lines. Taking advantage of his surge in sympathetic popularity immediately after the assassination attempt, the Shah had a bill passed through the Majlis calling for a constituent assembly to be formed to re-examine the Constitution of 1906. As this constituent assembly was dominated by allies of the Shah, he was able to enact several laws to his own great benefit. Lèse-majesté was introduced, making it illegal to criticize the Shah or the royal family. Ownership of crown lands was changed so that the land was held directly by the Shah. Reza Mohammad Shah also succeeded in dividing parliament into 2 separate chambers. The 60-man Senate became the upper house, with half of its seats being filled by men appointed by the Shah himself. The Shah also gained the right to dissolve both chambers of parliament. So with these changes now in place, elections were arranged for July of 1949 to elect the 16th Majlis. The elections were held, but the claims of fraud and falsification were rampant, and calls for public protest grew. Mohammad Mossadegh, listening to the demands of the people, called for a protest to be held on October 13th, when thousands marched on the royal palace to request a bast. For those of you who may not know, a bast is a type of sit-in protest often used in revolutionary situations in Iran. It's characterized by being held in a mutually agreeable location where the protesters can make their demands free from persecution. 20 representatives were selected to start bast in the royal gardens, where they called on the Shah to prevent the court minister, Abdul Hussein Hazir, from falsifying the election results. Hazir met with the protesters himself, promising the results would be examined for fairness, and in the event they were found to be unfair, they would be dismissed, with new elections held. Sounds like a total win for the protesters, right? That's what they themselves thought, as the group went on to form the National Front, a coalition of parties led by Mohammad Mossadegh. The groups represented within the National Coalition were generally in favor of more democracy, more civil liberties, and a functional constitutional government. Critically, especially for this story, they were also against foreign exploitation of Iran's natural resources, specifically oil. I'm sure you can guess the direction this is all heading. Hazir himself was not able to examine the election results as he was assassinated in November by Fadiyan-e-Islam, but the Shah himself decided that new elections would be held in February of 1950. While the National Front coalition only won between 7 and 11 seats, depending if you want to qualify certain groups as part of the coalition or just allies, their message about nationalization of the oil industry was gaining a lot of traction. When Haj Ali Razmara, the Prime Minister-elect and an opponent of oil nationalization, was assassinated by a member of Fadiyan-e-Islam, in March of 1951, a new Prime Minister was needed. Mohammad Mossadegh was selected. Now, we need to explain Fadiyan-e-Islam. An Islamist organization founded in 1946, it looked to bring a more fundamentalist practice of Islam to Iran in the face of growing foreign influence. Drawing support from the economically disadvantaged youth of Iran, it's recognized as an early influence on the religious terrorist organizations that were to come. But more on that later. The spiritual leader of Fadiyan-e-Islam was Abul Qasim Kashani, who was appointed as the Speaker of the new parliament. Critical to our current story, he was an ardent supporter of the nationalization of the oil industry. The mutual desire between Kashani and Mossadegh to nationalize Iranian oil created an interesting, albeit temporary, alliance between the religious leader and the strident secularist. Mossadegh hoped that Kashani would help mobilize the religious forces in the country to back the nationalization program, while Kashani hoped that Mossadegh would help to establish Sharia law in Iran. Clearly, this was an alliance of convenience, as you can well imagine. It really didn't last long. Interestingly, the Shah also understood and tried to take advantage of the religious factions present in the country, and called on Ayatollah Sayyid Hossein Borujerdi to convene his supporters and convince them of the need for religious quietism, the disinvolvement of religion in politics. In exchange, the Shah promised to remain uninvolved in religious matters. A meeting of leading clerics in the city of Qom on February 20th, 1949, resulted in a consensus of non-interference. Keep in mind, of course, that there were still some clerics who favored religious involvement in political life. Notably, the future Ayatollah Khomeini. We'll have lots more about him later in our series. Okay, so Mossadegh, a firm believer in democracy and parliamentary power, is now the Prime Minister. As such, he viewed the Shah as a symbolic figure. The Shah, on the other hand, didn't agree with this and wanted real power of his own. Understanding the widespread popularity surrounding the idea of nationalization of the oil industry, the Shah threw his support behind this. While he knew this would likely increase support for Mossadegh, he also knew he would gain support of his own. On May 1st, 1951, the oil industry in Iran was nationalized. Mossadegh...
It was called the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company. Guess who the Anglos were? We were kind of peeved that they nationalised the oil. We were using it as a slush fund, a way of bringing money into the country. Not good. So so this is the precursor to basically the Suez Crisis, because we got a bit butthurt when they nationalised the Suez Canal. And we invaded Egypt, and the Americans said, no, bad Britain. And threatened us with economic sanctions, reporting us to the World Bank, the IMF. You off to bed, darling? Stay hydrated. Self-care is good care. Take your meds if you need to take any. Stay based. Free Palestine. And tell West Street to piss off. Night, darling. Carry on, David.
not wanting to completely alienate Britain, offered a 50-50 profit-sharing scheme between Iran and the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company. A similar deal had recently been achieved in Venezuela, and Mossadegh hoped for something similar. Despite the United States urging London to accept the proposal, the British refused and instead started making plans for the removal of Mossadegh and his supporters from power. But before we get to those plans, what was the impact of nationalization on oil production itself? To be straightforward, it was terrible. The Iranian oil industry had been highly reliant on equipment and expertise that had been supplied by Britain. Iran also lacked its own fleet of tankers, so what oil was being extracted had no easy way of getting to markets. Oil production in the Abadan oil field was actually brought to a halt. Compounding the economic impact was a sanction regime imposed by the British, which included a ban on key imports like sugar and steel, the freezing of Iranian bank accounts, and orders for the Royal Navy to stop any ships transporting Iranian oil. Bipartisan support in the British Parliament, led by the recently re-elected Winston Churchill, favored harsh treatment of Iran. Mossadegh, as a result, turned to the US looking for support, and although President Truman initially favored supporting the Iranians, he did end up favoring the British position, as the United States was reliant on British support for the ongoing conflict in Korea.
Hi Socknow, rejoice comrades, Socknow is here. Hi comrade.
One thing, by the way, and I'll be very clear here, when we say the US ended up supporting the British position in Iran, that means the United States began to help undermine the Iranian government. So back in Iran, with living conditions worsening as the economic situation spiraled, fresh parliamentary elections were held. Despite Mossadegh's democratic credentials, these elections were also marred by controversy. On one side were the claims of British interference, including widespread bribery of candidates and regional leaders in an effort to create a pro-Western bloc in parliament. On the other side, Mossadegh himself was accused of interference when he decided to halt the multi-day election process as soon as he had reached a quorum of seats, a mere 79 of the total 136 seats available. The National Front took 30 seats, while Royalists and pro-British groups took 49. Tudeh, the Soviet-backed leftists, you'll remember, failed to win a single seat despite having the second largest number of overall votes. The position of the Royalists regarding nationalization was ambiguous. Although the Shah publicly supported nationalization, he was very much hoping that the crisis would result in Mossadegh being removed from office, allowing the Shah to assert greater influence. Mossadegh's position was becoming more complicated as time went on. Oil production had dropped almost tenfold, and his efforts to launch an economy without oil campaign aimed to decrease dependency on oil was extremely hard to implement in the middle of the crisis.
Yeah.
Mossadegh's support from the Islamists was also beginning to crumble as Kashani's hopes of the introduction of Sharia law went unrealized. So, Mossadegh increasingly became the focus of blame for both the economic and political crisis. Violence in the form of street clashes became rampant, and by August of 1952, Mossadegh made the decision to rule via emergency powers. After a failed assassination attempt on himself and one of his cabinet ministers, he ordered the jailing of dozens of his political opponents. As you may well imagine, this created further anger in the populace, and accusations of Mossadegh establishing himself as a dictator. After the resignation of many of Mossadegh's supporters in parliament, he decided to hold a referendum on dissolving the Mejlis and ruling by executive decree. The widespread rigging of the referendum resulted in a 99.9% approval rating for this plan, which you can be sure was very well received. To add further fuel to this political mess, Tudeh switched its opposition to Mossadegh and began to support him, launching violent attacks on anti-government opponents. Mossadegh protested this, but Tudeh continued, further undermining Mossadegh's position. So that's the mess inside of Iran, but we all know these things don't ever happen in a vacuum, especially when oil is involved. The election of Dwight D. Eisenhower in 1952 saw the Americans taking a more involved approach in Iran and pursued the removal of Mossadegh from office. Although the Shah initially refused to take part in the coup, he eventually changed his mind and dismissed Mossadegh from office, replacing him with General Fazlollah Zahedi. Mossadegh refused the dismissal, and millions of his supporters, as well as those from Tudeh, took to the streets in protest. Fearing the outcome, the Shah and his family fled the country, while many of the coup's plotters and supporters were jailed. Mossadegh, believing the plot to have failed, called his supporters home. The plotters, on the other hand, had other ideas. Zahedi met with the wealthy pro-Shah Ayatollah Behbahani and other royalists. They arranged for a confrontation to be staged in Tehran, which took place on August 19, 1952. Paid infiltrators, claiming to be members of Tudeh, started a protest calling for a communist revolution. Genuine members of Tudeh soon joined in the protest, and before too long, widespread destruction of shops and businesses was underway. At the same time this was happening, Zahedi and the plotters had a second group of paid infiltrators posing as supporters of the Shah, gathering and calling for large-scale opposition to the communist revolution. As you can expect, violence between the groups ensued. This allowed General Zahedi to call in the army to restore order. The army forces, with support from the anti-Tudeh groups, quickly took control of government buildings and Mossadegh. Fearing more bloodshed, refused to escalate the situation any further. Mossadegh was arrested upon the return of the Shah, who, it should be noted, was accompanied by CIA Director John Foster Dulles. Pure coincidence, I'm sure. The coup completed, the nationalization of the Iranian oil industry was reversed, but with the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company monopoly being broken up, 5 American oil companies were allowed into the market, as well as the Dutch company Royal Dutch Shell and the French Oil Company. The Western-backed coup in Iran cemented a pro-Western direction for the country for the foreseeable future. However, it also soured the support for the West greatly amongst the Iranian people. In the wake of the coup, the Shah assumed single-handed governance of Iran for the next 26 years. But the failure of democracy in the country, combined with dictatorial rule and the meddling of both capitalist and socialist forces in Iranian affairs, set the country on a path to catastrophic change. The West, for its part, found that covert regime change could be an effective option in projecting its power and influence into regions, something that they would gain a great deal more practice with as the Cold War progressed. We here at the Cold War will continue to discuss this and more in our future videos, so please make sure that you're subscribed to our channel and have pressed the bell button. We rely on our patrons to create these videos, so consider supporting us via www.patreon.com/thecoldwar. This is the Cold War channel, and we will catch you on the next one.
What would anyone like? We could do history tonight if you like. I'm trying to think what sort of direction I want to go in. Oh, I can show the... This is a good one. Playlists. Oh no, it's the other one.
the chances are that you've never heard the name Basil d'Oliveira before, and that's okay, because unfortunately most people haven't. But his is a name and a story that should be much more widely known and celebrated, because it's rare for one man, simply by playing sport, to change the course of human history. It's even more rare when that sport in question is cricket. Oh yes, the most antiquated of English pastimes, which I personally love dearly, but realise is rather niche on a global scale, and incredibly at odds with the modern world. But that is precisely what happened in the late summer of 1968, as events in England would set in motion the eventual downfall of the apartheid regime in South Africa, and the world would never be the same again. This is the D'Oliveira affair. Basil Louis d'Oliveira was born on the 4th of October 1931 in Cape Town, South Africa, in what was technically the pre-apartheid era, although it was still very much a racially stratified society. D'Oliveira was classified as a Cape Coloured, which was a racial classification used in South Africa to denote someone of mixed racial origin, often including those of European, Indian and Native African mixed ethnicity. And the Cape Coloured's were a pretty diverse set of peoples, who comprised a minority in South Africa in general, but were the predominant population of the Western Cape, where d'Oliveira was born and grew up. Basil's family were of Indian and Portuguese heritage, which meant that when the apartheid system was officially adopted in South Africa in 1948, when Basil was just 16 years old, he was classified as coloured, and thus non-white. He was a second-class citizen, deprived of various basic human rights, including the ability to represent his nation on a sports field, a point that would come to define the young man's life in later years. Young Basil was a gifted athlete and excelled at both soccer and cricket, the latter being his real passion, where he had an extraordinary ability as a batsman, medium-pace seam bowler, and was also a superb fielder, even able to field in the slip cordon. However, when he reached the age where a profession in the sport would be the natural route for a gifted all-rounder such as himself to take, he found his way barred due to the apartheid state banning non-white participation in first-class cricket in South Africa. This led to a fateful decision by d'Oliveira to up sticks and try his luck thousands of miles from home in the UK. With the help of legendary English cricket journalist and commentator John Arlott, who was a firm opponent of apartheid, which was by no means a popular position in cricketing circles in England at the time. Dolly, as Basil would affectionately become nicknamed by his friends, moved to Britain in 1960 to seek a career in the sport he loved. He initially played for Middleton Cricket Club, a minor team in Lancashire, and excelled immediately, topping the league batting averages in his first season. He quickly progressed to the first-class cricket circuit, where he joined Worcestershire County Cricket Club in 1964, and firmly established himself as one of the best players in the country. In 1965 he gained his United Kingdom citizenship and was selected to play for England, making his Test match debut the following year. And by the way, when I say Test match, that refers to the highest level a player can get to in cricket. The game lasts for 5 days, which I know drove Americans absolutely crazy, but whatever. Basically, it meant that d'Oliveira had reached the top of his profession, and the ramifications of this for world history were significantly larger than anyone at the time could possibly have known. Before we take a look at Basil's international career, it is worth us taking a moment to look at the apartheid system in South Africa at the time, in order to lay the background for the diplomatic shenanigans that were to follow Basil's selection for the England team. Now, most people know the basics of the apartheid system, which existed in South Africa from 1948 to 1994, that being that white folks were first-class citizens and non-white folks very much weren't, which is obviously a very simplified version of things, but is basically true. The non-white racial classifications of African, coloured or Indian, as they were laid out in legislation, meant that those people had limited opportunities in all areas, including but not limited to housing, employment, education and the use of public facilities, even though they made up around 85% of the population, and of course there was the state's violent oppression of them as well. And in an illuminating coincidence for this video, just days before Basil would leave South Africa for his new life in England, the South African police force killed 69 people and wounded 180 in the infamous Sharpeville massacre, which must further have reinforced in d'Oliveira's mind how right he was in leaving the country. And indeed, much like himself, the Sharpeville massacre has had a lasting impact on South African society, with March the 21st, the anniversary day of the massacre, being a national public holiday, a day of remembrance in South Africa still to this day. And allied to all of this, and pertinently to the subject of this video, was the apartheid regime's racial segregation of all sporting events. There were black leagues in all of the sports, but these were underfunded and not really a place where a talented person could actually earn a living, hence why Basil left the country. And all of the South African national teams were exclusively white, even though whites made up only roughly 15% 1/5% of the South African population at the time. This was cultural white supremacist evil at its most brazen. But in addition to that, the South African government was so fragile in their white so-called supremacy that they wouldn't even allow racially mixed teams to compete against South African national sides, for fear of losing to non-white players and having to come face to face with the fact that maybe, just maybe, they weren't the racial elite they pretended to be after all. And it was this backwardness which would ultimately lead to the sporting boycott, which started technically with South Africa's exclusion from the Olympics in 1964, but would really come to a head with the exposure thrown on the apartheid regime by the international diplomatic controversies surrounding the cancelled cricket tours of 1968 and 1970.
And a great stroke. And again, hammered away delightfully off the back foot. 4 glorious runs to D'Oliveira. 4. That's that shot of D'Oliveira's. That is a lovely shot. That's 4 runs.
Basil's England career got off to a very positive start. Even though the England team of the time were not especially good, D'Oliveira was very much a bright spot though, a source of stability and consistency, providing solid middle-order batting performances, taking wickets at an economical rate, and was one of the team's best fielders as well. He firmly established himself in the England team during the 1966 season, and the next year followed this up with significant contributions to England's 2-0 series win over Pakistan, including a spirited 81 not out in England's second innings of the Lord's Test match. And for all of his efforts, he was named as one of the Wisden Cricketers of the Year for 1967, which was an award given out by the Wisden Cricketers Almanac for the top 5 players who had had the greatest influence on the previous season. Then followed a career highlight reel moment in the series against the West Indies in 1968. And for those who don't know, the West Indies is a team comprising of many nations. It's the Anglophone Caribbean island nations and Guyana on the South American mainland. Now, after Basil had made solid contributions throughout the series, in the 4th test at Port of Spain, Trinidad, on March the 19th of that year, Basil would hit the winning run with just 3 balls to spare to secure an astounding victory for England.
Gibbs comes in, bows to D'Oliveira, and he's played around the corner, and they're taking it. England have won. England won a memorable victory.
Basil would then make telling contributions to a spirited England effort to draw the 1968 Ashes series against Australia 1-1. And it was these performances and accolades for D'Oliveira that got the South African government very worried indeed.
Ah. Shenanigans.
Ever since Basil had been selected for the England team in 1966, there had been back-channel communications between English and South African cricketing authorities about D'Oliveira's potential inclusion on the scheduled 1968-1969 tour of South Africa by the England team, although these talks were never made public because of the South African government's concern over its international reputation. Indeed, the South African Prime Minister B.J. Vorster publicly stated that the inclusion of D'Oliveira would not in fact be a problem, even though behind the scenes he had let it be known that any squad including D'Oliveira would not be allowed to play against the all-white South African national team under any circumstances. And in 1967, Vorster's own Interior Minister, Pieter Le Roux, had stated,
"We will not allow mixed teams to play against our white teams here. That is our policy. It is well known here and overseas."
Which is pretty unequivocal if you ask me. And in addition to this, Vorster himself even went so far as to instruct agents of the South African government to attempt to bribe D'Oliveira into making himself unavailable for the tour. Most notably, even as late as the summer of 1968 itself, only months before the tour was due to take place, the South African government used a guy called Tinani Oosthuizen, who was the director of the Carreras Tobacco Company, to offer D'Oliveira a job coaching amateur cricket teams in South Africa at a salary of £4,000, which was a much higher wage than Basil could possibly have earned as a professional cricketer at that time. But this job offer came with the catch that D'Oliveira must make himself unavailable for selection for the South Africa tour in 1968. However, D'Oliveira was too clever for this nonsense and could see these machinations for what they were, and rejected all of the bribes and inducements offered to him, and carried on just playing cricket, which was all he ever really wanted to do in the first place. And although he had a slump in form with his batting during England's tour of the West Indies in early 1968, he would make a significant impact later in the year in the 5th test against Australia at the Oval in London, when he scored 158 runs in the first innings and made a vital breakthrough with his bowling later in the game, breaking a long Australian batting partnership with just his 12th delivery, allowing his fellow England bowler Derek Underwood to bowl England to victory in the match and share the Ashes series 1 apiece. Basil had undoubtedly secured himself a place on merit for the squad to tour South Africa later in the year, but there were several twists in the tale yet to come.
Where's that going? Is it out to the boundary? Who's there?
Out.
Caught. Caught by D'Oliveira.
because there's been no safer fieldsman on the ground in this series than D'Oliveira, and his throwing has been absolutely magnificent.
And he's caught by D'Oliveira. Yes, he's out.
The selection for the final squad to tour South Africa took place on the 27th of August 1968 at a meeting of the Marylebone Cricket Club, which is the rather absurd organisation whose 8-man selection panel between the years 1903 to 1977 got to choose the England team for some reason. But whatever. The meeting took place just 5 days after Basil had scored that incredible 158 in the final Ashes test of the summer. There is simply no way that they could not select D'Oliveira if merit and merit alone were the only criteria being used. But alas, that was most assuredly not the only consideration of the selection panel. The selection committee of the MCC assembled amid great public and political pressure, notably pressure from the English cricketing public for D'Oliveira to be selected on merit, and from the opposite direction, pressure from the South African government, who had sent a clandestine letter to members of the committee outlining that if D'Oliveira were selected, it may very well cause the cancellation of the tour altogether, along with the enormous financial loss that this would cause to the MCC's coffers. The committee took...
Me think these fascist bastards are scared. Yeah. Fucking cowards.
The very cowardly approach and decided not to select D'Oliveira for the touring party, and to add insult to injury, they didn't even bother to inform Basil personally. D'Oliveira would only hear of his non-selection over the radio after coming off the field playing for Worcestershire, where he had scored yet another century, this time 128 against Sussex in the county championship, again further underlining that D'Oliveira was in such good form that he was well worth a place in that squad. There can be no doubt that, as former West Indies Test player Leary Constantine said of the decision, that
it's deeply suspicious to me. It's either because of his race or the MCC supports apartheid.
And although members of the committee defended their decision on cricketing grounds, it was obvious that this was an absurd defence. Firstly, there was clearly at least one mole on the committee who had been feeding information to the South African government, because they seemed suspiciously well aware of the committee's proceedings, even though those proceedings were never made available to the public. So the South African government must have had a man working on the inside for them. And secondly, there was the fact that of the 8-man selection panel, of which only 6 were present, 2 of them had far-right political leanings. Firstly, there was Alec Bedser, who was well known for his extreme rightist views, and would later go on to join a group called the Freedom Association, which was virulently anti-trade unionism. But worst of all was former England cricket captain and president of the MCC at the time, and thus a member of the selection panel, Arthur Gilligan, who had been a member of a group called the British Fascists, which was the first political party in British history to self-identify as fascist, and was itself a precursor to Oswald Mosley's British Union of Fascists in later years. Gilligan had been known to extol the virtues of Mussolini's fascism, according to teammates, and in his former role as England Test match captain during England's tour of Australia in 1924-25, he had helped set up offices of the Australian version of the organisation. Gilligan had literally helped spread fascism around the globe, and as an aside, he was also a terrible, dreadful captain, but thankfully his England captaincy was very short-lived. It just goes to show you that fascists always lose. And by the way, in the article I just showed you, some of you may have noticed the name William Joyce, and the William Joyce referenced in the article is indeed that William Joyce, more commonly known as Lord Haw Haw, the Nazi propagandist who would broadcast from Nazi Germany into Britain during World War II, and after the war was executed for treason. Yeah, Arthur Gilligan was in the same political party as Lord Haw Haw, and even wrote an article entitled The Spirit of Fascism and Cricket, and yet we are supposed to believe that this guy, as president of the MCC, who along with Bedser made up a third of the selection panel present, was somehow not being racist in choosing to not select the brown chap who was obviously worthy of selection. I mean, come on now, that just stretches credulity a little too far for any reasonable person. And in addition to all of this, other members of the committee had been seen as apologists for the South African government and BJ Vorster personally, and although their public pronouncements on these matters may have been diplomatic efforts at ensuring that the tour would remain a viable possibility, it still very much calls into question their motives for omitting D'Oliveira from the team.
It's D'Oliveira bowling to Lilly. He's out caught.
That's out. Play before wicket. D'Oliveira claims the first victim for England.
He's out. Well, there we are. There's the first wicket. D'Oliveira has got it. And he's done it again. A thick inside edge and Chappell is out. A little bit of fat probably there for Basil D'Oliveira.
The response to De Oliveira's non-selection was overwhelming. Many members of the MCC resigned in protest at the decision, and former England captain David Shepherd, along with 70 other MCC members, called for the tour to be cancelled. There was a letter-writing campaign to British Prime Minister Harold Wilson asking him to personally intervene in the matter, and the British anti-apartheid movement began to gain serious momentum in the wake of the De Oliveira scandal. In South Africa, the news was greeted as a betrayal by the non-white population, and as a relief by white nationalists and the apartheid regime. Although this joy by the whites would be tempered soon after with the news that De Oliveira had agreed to cover the series as a journalist for the British newspaper The News of the World. This outraged Vorster, as non-whites were not allowed in press boxes except in menial capacities, and Vorster threatened to ban De Oliveira from even being on the tour as a journalist. However, that particular threat would pale into insignificance with what came next, because one of the England team that had been selected for the tour, fast bowler Tom Cartwright, had been struggling with an injury and withdrew from the squad, although there is some suspicion that Cartwright may have had moral reservations about touring in apartheid South Africa, but didn't want to publicly embarrass the MCC, so fabricated the injury story to allow a plausible way out of the touring party. But whatever the case may be, upon Cartwright's withdrawal from the squad, there was nowhere else to go but for the MCC to select De Oliveira for the tour, and in an extraordinary meeting, the committee took just 10 minutes to decide to add Basil to the squad on September the 15th, and from that point on, there was no turning back. In Britain, the news was received positively by most people, although some had reservations about the diplomatic implications of the decision, and some, let's just be honest here, were racist pricks. And in South Africa, Prime Minister Vorster was outraged, slamming the decision as politically motivated, stating at an Orange Free State Congress rally in Bloemfontein on September the 17th,
"We are, and always have been, prepared to play host to the MCC. We are not prepared to receive a team thrust upon us by people whose interests are not the game, but to gain certain political objectives, which they did not even attempt to hide. This is not the team of the MCC, but the team of an anti-apartheid movement, the team of Sanrock."
Now what's especially galling about that pile of tripe from Vorster is the idea contained within it that somehow the decades-long policy of only selecting white players for South African national sporting teams was somehow not a political act. The notion that having whites-only sporting representation was in some way not a glaring political statement, which is of course utter nonsense. And also that having strict racial segregation was somehow good for the sport. I mean, firstly there's the moral aspect of excluding 85% of your own population, which is of course disgusting, but even from a purely sporting perspective, how can it possibly have been beneficial for South Africa to have been missing out on huge amounts of non-white sporting talent for so long? And one needs only to look at the central figure of our story to see that clearly it wasn't good for the game. The South African cricket team had purposefully missed the opportunity to have a very talented player in their team, and countless other great non-white players as well. And although that ranting tirade of drivel from Vorster received rapturous applause from the racist rabble in Bloemfontein, many in the South African media were critical of Vorster, as they fully understood the potential ramifications for South Africa in terms of a sporting and eventual economic boycott. This whole affair led to frenzied diplomatic efforts being made to save the tour, with MCC member Colin Cowdrey flying to South Africa for talks, and later representatives of the South African Cricket Association flew to London for a meeting with the MCC. But no common ground could be reached. The South African government would not countenance allowing a non-white player to face their all-white team, and the MCC could not be seen to back down to the increasingly unpopular racist apartheid system. And although it was very much Vorster and the South African government who cancelled the tour, it was the MCC who announced it to the world, following an extraordinary 4-hour meeting of the full committee at Lord's Cricket Ground on September the 24th. They released a statement, the pertinent part of which is this.
"The side selected to represent MCC in South Africa is not acceptable for reasons beyond the control of the South African Cricket Association. The MCC committee therefore decided unanimously that the tour will not take place."
And so the die was cast, and South Africa would never be the same again. Following the events of 1968, the British government intervened to cancel the proposed tour of the South African team in England, scheduled for 1970. Spearheaded by pressure from then Home Secretary and future Prime Minister James Callaghan, the British government took the unprecedented step of sending a formal request from Her Majesty's government to withdraw the invitation of the South African touring team, and this amounted to a demand that the MCC could hardly refuse to enforce, however much the more intransigent members of the committee may have wished to. The British government took this step for a few reasons. Firstly, to avoid any of the racially motivated chicanery seen from the South African apartheid government in the 1968 De Oliveira affair. Secondly, to ensure the freedom of the England team to select whoever they wished. For instance, Basil himself was still very much around at the time, and would go on to take part in the 5-match series against a rest of the world team, which replaced the fixtures of the banned South Africa tour, with Dolly providing a superb bowling performance in a winning effort in the second test at Trent Bridge, Nottingham, with figures of 4 for 43 and 3 for 63 taking England to victory, and a classy batting performance in the third test at Edgbaston, Birmingham, with innings of 110 and 81, propping up the rest of England's shaky batting lineup in that game. And the third main reason the UK government stepped in was because of threats from many nations of the Commonwealth, which is a weird club of largely former British colonial nations, to boycott the upcoming Commonwealth Games, which is a sort of mini Olympics if you will, which was due to take place in Edinburgh, Scotland in July of 1970, and that boycott would go ahead if the South Africa tour was allowed to take place, which was thankfully avoided due to the government's strong action. Clearly the sporting boycott effects of the De Oliveira affair were starting to take hold, and so the UK government banned South Africa until such a time as it would completely drop its policy of strict racial segregation, and indeed no South African cricket team would play in England again until 1994. Finally, the British government had done its duty by basic human rights and stood up to the apartheid regime and banned racially segregated South African sports teams from playing in Britain. Finally, a powerful Western nation had opposed the apartheid regime, and this paved the way for other powerful nations to follow suit. And anti-apartheid movements flourished all over the world in the wake of the De Oliveira affair. The decision of the British government to cancel the South African tour of England in 1970 was itself a precursor to the decision made by the International Cricket Council to ban apartheid South Africa from cricket completely in 1971, with no South African team participating in official international cricket again until 1991. And this is where it began to snowball for apartheid South Africa. This ban from cricket was followed swiftly by sport after sport prohibiting the nation from competition until it ended its policy of strict racial segregation. Most notably the International Olympic Committee, which had actually banned South Africa 4 years prior in 1964 in the wake of the conviction and imprisonment of Nelson Mandela and his comrades, but the IOC in 1968 was preparing to reinstate South Africa. But events forced their hand into permanently suspending the apartheid state from the Summer and Winter Olympics, even though the IOC's incredibly racist president Avery Brundage fiercely opposed the move, and he was yet another Nazi lover who was a powerful sports administrator at the time. The world of sports administration had some really significant issues at the time. I mean, it still does, but that's a different matter entirely. However, the ban passed the Olympic Committee, and South Africa would not compete at IOC events until the Summer Games of 1992 in Barcelona. The sporting boycott of South Africa just grew and grew from there, as they were banned by the International Athletics Federation in 1970, and in the same year the South African team were ejected from tennis's premier international competition, the Davis Cup. And although they were readmitted to the 1977 and 78 editions of the tournament, those were so heavily boycotted by other nations that tennis authorities banned South Africa completely in 1979. South Africa was shut out from the first 2 editions of the Rugby World Cup, which really hurt this most rugby-loving of nations. They were suspended by soccer's world governing body FIFA, and South Africa were even banned by the World Chess Olympiad in 1970. The country was almost completely cut off from the rest of the sporting world. Now some of you might be thinking, well Kev, it's just sport, so why does this really matter? Well, firstly, the sporting boycott led to a wider cultural boycott from musicians, artists and academics who refused to go to the country or to work with South African institutions, thus further isolating them. This led to huge amounts of pressures put on governments and businesses all over the world, and eventually led to a very successful economic boycott, including significant economic sanctions placed on the country by nations and trading blocs all around the world. And the resultant political pressure of this from all across the globe would lead to apartheid's collapse in the early 1990s. And in terms of who cares, it's just sport after all, well, the South African people certainly cared. When polled in 1985, the South African public named the sporting boycott as one of the top 3 negative outcomes of the apartheid regime, and Basil got that ball rolling in 1968, simply by playing the sport he loved. Basil was undoubtedly an implacable opponent of apartheid, but he didn't think that by playing sport he could bring it down. Cricket is not by its very nature revolutionary, but on this occasion it had some massive impacts. Now clearly the De Oliveira affair was far from being the only factor in the downfall of apartheid. Like any major international political sea change, there are a huge number of individuals, groups, incidents and pressures that move the course of events forward. It's just that the role played by this unassuming, humble man from Cape Town has not remotely received the public acclaim, certainly in modern times, that it so righteously deserves, especially as it comes from such a peculiar source, because unintentionally, just by being really good at cricket, Basil D'Oliveira had a massive impact on the downfall of the apartheid regime in South Africa and changed the world forever, changed the world through sport for the good, a change that thankfully he would live to experience for himself, as he got to see Nelson Mandela released and become president of a united apartheid-free South Africa, with the two of them becoming firm friends, Mandela even going so far as to thank and praise Basil for the strength and grace he showed during the events of 1968.
Sports played a very important role in forcing the regime at the time to abandon apartheid.
And this man played his part?
Well, of course, that's why he is our hero.
And Basil would go on to outlive the apartheid regime by 17 years, and is remembered as a hero in South Africa to this day, and I can think of little else more beautiful than that. Ultimately, Basil would go on to play for England until 1972, and during his 44 Test matches, he amassed very good career figures, achieving what is generally accepted as the mark of a real all-rounder, that being that his batting average was higher than his bowling average, and I won't bore you by trying to explain to you what that really means, but basically it shows that he was very good at cricket. In 2005, Basil was awarded a CBE in the New Year's Honours List, and has a stand named after him at the New Road Cricket Ground in Worcester, the home of Worcestershire County Cricket Club, and where Basil played for 15 years before retiring in 1979. Here the stand is seen behind Brett D'Oliveira, Basil's grandson, who plays for the county at the present time. You see, these bloody foreigners coming over here, making generations-long positive contributions to British society. And as a fitting tribute to Dolly, a perpetual statue was struck and is awarded to the winners of Test match series between South Africa and England every time they face off against each other. Literally, when the land of his birth and his adopted homeland meet to play, they play for the Basil D'Oliveira Trophy. And to top it all off, in the year 2000, Basil was named in South Africa as one of their top 10 cricketers of the 20th century, even though he never actually played for South Africa, which is a very nice way of sticking two fingers up to the apartheid regime and its horrific barbarism. Basil fought the good fight, and in the end he got the cricketing recognition that he so thoroughly deserves.
'80. Not bad age. Fractured left?
South Africa commemorates Human Rights Day. Victims and families of those who died at the Sharpeville massacre on the 21st of March 60 years ago are seeking reparations. The apartheid police killed 69 unarmed men, women and children in cold blood in the township after they protested the passed laws. This act cascaded into a series of events that helped to put pressure on the apartheid government to free black people. Hitekani Makwedze reports.
On the face of it, it looks like any other township in South Africa, battling the usual service delivery challenges and other social ills.
What was the Sharpeville massacre? Have you ever wondered how a single event can change the course of a nation's history? The Sharpeville massacre...
Oh God, it's an AI voice. Fuck it. Rejoice, comrades, Mr. the Breeson. Hi, John. Sharpeville massacre. Kev suggested it fucking months ago to me.
...is one such event that left a lasting mark on South Africa and the world. This tragic incident took place on March 21, 1960, in the township of Sharpeville, near Vereeniging, South Africa. It was a peaceful protest against the apartheid regime's past laws, which forced black South Africans to carry identification documents that restricted their movement. The demonstration was organized by the Pan-Africanist Congress, a group that opposed apartheid policies. Thousands of unarmed black South Africans gathered outside a police station, intending to surrender their passbooks and invite arrest as a form of nonviolent resistance. However, the situation escalated when police opened fire on the crowd. In total, 69 people were killed, and around 180 were injured, many of whom were women and children. Most victims were shot in the back, indicating they were fleeing when the shots were fired. The massacre shocked not only the nation but also the world. It marked one of the most violent confrontations in the struggle against apartheid. Following this event, the South African government declared a state of emergency, banned the Pan-Africanist Congress and the African National Congress, and intensified repression of anti-apartheid activists. International attention on apartheid grew significantly after Sharpeville. This event contributed to the global condemnation of South Africa's racial segregation policies. The Sharpeville massacre serves as a powerful symbol of the struggle for dignity and equality. In the realm of literature, the Sharpeville massacre can be portrayed as a defining moment of injustice and resistance. It provides a backdrop for stories that explore the human cost of apartheid. Authors may depict the courage and tragedy faced by individuals during this time, illustrating the harsh realities of oppression. Such narratives can help readers understand the impact of apartheid on individual lives and society as a whole. The Sharpeville massacre remains a significant event in both South African history and the broader context of literary history. It highlights the ongoing fight for justice and equality, making it a poignant topic for writers and readers alike.
I've done all them in the past. Right, let's see what else. News. Oh, thanks, Jose. No, already done that one. Oh, that might be fun.
Do you want to know about social injustice in Scottish history? Let me tell you a story. Now, as I do, if you're interested in the people, places and events in Scottish history, then click the subscribe button in the bottom right hand side of the screen at any time. In the meantime, let me tell you my story. Now, civil strife and social injustice happen in lots of places. But it's the 29th of August, and from one of the two main locations of the events in our story, I want to take you back to Tranent, East Lothian in 1797. The union between Scotland and England happened 90 years ago. After hundreds of years of fighting with our southern neighbours, the good thing about the union was that finally wars had stopped. I mean, there were the Jacobite wars of the first half of the century. And of course, we've been dragged into England's wars. The War of the Spanish Succession, the War of the Austrian Succession, there have been some wars in India, the 7 Years' War, the Mysore War in India, the Anglo-Maratha War in India. Oh, there was that rebellion in the Americas. They all come to a sticky end. And of course now we're at war with France. But apart from that, it's been pretty peaceful. Now, the thing about all these English wars is that now they've become our wars too. We've been incorporated into the English army. Well, almost. You see, in 1757 they introduced the Militia Act. That meant the creation of military reserves locally in each county. Now, these reserves would provide backup on the home front so that regular army could be sent abroad. But the requirement only applied in England and Wales. Here in Scotland, we just continued as we were, with volunteer units here and there, normally organised by nobility or clan chiefs. You know, up in the Highlands where they talk Irish and that. Then, 3 years ago, a royal warrant created Lord Lieutenants in each county. Here is the Marquis of Tweedale, but he had deputies, and one of them, David Anderson, lived in this house, Saint-Germain. I know, it sounds French, and I get the irony. The house is split into 7 now, and I've been welcomed here by the owners of the Saint-Germain bed and breakfast. So the lieutenants had to organise volunteer forces to protect the counties in case of invasion by the French. The French, who up until this union thing had protected us against the English. Or did we protect them? I'm not sure. Anyway, now this year they've passed the Militia Act for Scotland, and these Lord Lieutenants are required to raise militias in every county. Not volunteers. They draw lots in a ballot to decide who will be forced to join the militia.
Conscripts don't work.
So, the country is in uproar. Not just here.
I'll just give my wee bit here. Conscripts don't work. You can't literally just lift someone, put them in a militia or in the army, give them a fucking gun, a long arm, and say, you're a soldier now, because we don't like that. We're a volunteer army, we sign up, we join, we don't get forced in. How many times do I have to say that to other countries? Don't do conscripts, they don't fucking work. Now go away and fight our battles for us over there. Yeah, sometimes that doesn't fucking work.
In Trinent, but everywhere. And it's not just that folk are sick of their sons going off to war. Being forced into the militia means that you can be sent anywhere in the country as part of the home defence. Now what if you've got a harvest to get in? What if you've got a business to run? What if they do send you off to some foreign land? Now I know they say that you won't serve abroad, but they said that to the Black Watch, and look what happened to them. That's another story for another video. The point is that you can't trust the London government not to send you off to some foreign war for which you didn't sign up and to which they promised not to send you. There's one more reason that folks are furious about the Militia Act, but I'm going to save that until later. Aye, your eyes will pop out of your head when you hear it, and I don't want you to miss the story. So it's August 1797. There's civil unrest all over because of the Militia Act and these Lord Lieutenants with their lists of names and their roulette wheels. On the 29th of August, the Deputy Lieutenants tasked with raising the militia in this area were to meet in the Glens Inn in Trinent to draw the lottery. And of course to consider any exemptions.
Thanks, Dan.
You see, you could be exempted for service if you had a justifiable excuse. Let's say you had bone spurs, for example. I'll be honest, I don't know what bone spurs are, I just know that it gets you out of enlistment. But if you were a boxer, a fit and healthy black boxer, you might even be the greatest boxer, you couldn't get out of it then. Anyway, they're ludicrous examples and it's all fantasy and imagining. The point is that there was a big meeting to take place in Trinent on the 29th of August. So let's go there for a bit.
So there he was making a reference, the first one, the Bone Spurs one, to the current president. That's how he got out. Basically, Fred Trump, his dad, basically, with no evidence. This is pure speculation on some of our behalf. Lots of us believe this, that his dad paid off a doctor to write this. And say, oh, my son can't do that, look, his Bone Spurs. And the black boxer, medal-winning black boxer, was Muhammad Ali.
This is Trinent Town Centre, and this is Jackie Crookston. She's banging a drum, and she's got a wee bairn. You see, the night before the meeting, she went up and down the streets of Trinent, leading hordes of women and their bairns, shouting, "We'll have no militia here," to anyone that would listen. These women also went around the surrounding towns and villages banging that drum and telling folks to come to Trinent tomorrow to air their grievances and let the authorities know there'd be no militia here. And whilst this mob of women was going around surrounding villages, back here in Trinent, somebody threw stones at a dragoon. In different towns and villages, teachers faced varying levels of harassment. You see, teachers had the lists of the able-bodied men that had been through the school system as boys, and it was these lists that were used for balloting the militia. Some teachers were accosted and had their lists stolen so they couldn't be used the next day. Others had no problems. By the morning, the teachers' complaints had arrived back here at Saint-Germain, the house of the Deputy Lieutenant David Anderson. Realising that folk were upset, the gentlemen lieutenants headed to Tranent accompanied by yeomanry and cavalry, and they sent to Musselburgh for further reinforcements. When they got to Tranent, Jackie was still banging on about no militia. See what I did? The officials arrived at the Glens Inn around midday. Now, after a bit of shouting and Jackie Crookston's drum banging, the business of the day was announced to the crowd, and the lieutenants and teachers, etc., went in to get started with weeding out the exemptions and drawing lots. One by one, district by district, individuals came in to offer up their evidence of why they should be exempted. Now, obviously, the crowd outside is still restive, but in spite of their complaints, the process goes on. Then, in comes a potter called Neil Cooterside. What he places on the table isn't a justification for his own exclusion from the list, but a document signed by the townspeople opposing the Militia Act. Obviously, the chairman rejects this document out of hand, and Cooterside's sent away with a flea in his ear. Is that just a Scottish expression, to be sent away with a flea in your ear? I don't know. Anyway, when Cooterside related the events indoors to the crowd outside, then the women retreat to the back and the men move forward. Whoa, says Captain Finlay of the Cinque Ports Cavalry, and he sends his troopers forward. A woman throws a stone and knocks a trooper's hat off. Now that must have felt brilliant. But as the trooper gets down from his horse to get his hat, the trooper somehow falls. Captain Finlay orders his men to unsheath their swords, and oh my God, they charge, trampling and slashing the populace. The mob start throwing more stones and all hell breaks loose. Inside, one of the officials tries to read the Riot Act. Now, I don't know if you know what I mean by reading the Riot Act. Can you let me know in the comments section below? And if people don't know about this particular part of British history, then I'll cover it in a different video. Anyway, outside, the cavalry troops, who are apparently a bit sozzed, they're going up and down the street, charging and slashing. This sends people up the alleyways, and on the roof of one building, a guy called William Hunter starts throwing down stones and bricks at the troops. One soldier is sent round the back of the house to shoot him from behind. And as he tumbles from the roof, several other soldiers wait for his fallen body with outstretched weapons, so that as he topples from the roof, he's impaled on their swords. Now, this is the first, but not the last, gruesome act of the day. Pembrokeshire cavalry turn up. Now, if there was any doubt about the previous troops, these guys are definitely pissed. So much so that one sergeant slumps sozzled from his saddle. An officer, thinking he's been knocked off his horse, calls, "Why don't you fire?" They do. George Elder was shot dead with the first volley of bullets. The events are known as the Tranent Massacre. Now, I don't know how many you need in dead and injured to call it a massacre. What I do know is that the troops, who, let's remember, were essentially in a recruitment drive, didn't limit themselves to those who'd been involved in the rioting. The drunken troops were given the order to clear the county for 2 miles around. The 29th of August is after the glorious 12th, and the troops acted like they were shooting game. It started in the town. 19-year-old Isabel Roger, who'd been sewing cloth in the doorway of her house, was shot dead. William Lawson was a carpenter taking wood in his cart from Ormiston to Tranent. When he was accosted by troops, he explained that he'd never been near the riot, but they shot him anyway. Stephen Brotherson, along with his wife and an old man, were out for a walk about a mile from Tranent. As the troops arrived, the walkers stepped off the road to let them pass. It wasn't enough to shoot the innocent Brotherson. As he lay dying in his wife's arms, the dragoon then got down from his horse, drew his sword and slashed 6 times at his head and body, cutting through to the bone. The same troops continued on and shot dead William Laidlaw, a peasant labouring in the field. A 13-year-old boy called Kemp, who carried letters between Tranent and Ormiston, was chased down like an animal and stabbed and hacked to death in a field. Peter Ness, a sawmill worker, hadn't been in Tranent, but in a field outside the town he was shot multiple times, then robbed of his pocket watch. After he was killed, he was found dead with his pockets turned inside out. But there was more pillage than that. John Adam, a collier who lived in a village a couple of miles from Tranent, was walking to the shops to do a few errands. Dragoons approached him, shot him in the head, and as he lay dying, took from his pocket the 2 shillings that he'd carried to buy messages for his pregnant wife. At the start of this, I was going to name each victim to remember them. But to be honest, it's too harrowing even now. The soldiers also burst into a farmhouse and shot up a family that didn't even know there was a riot going on.
Disgusting.
Deputy lieutenants in charge on the day sued the Scots Chronicle for libel because they published a letter relating to one of the deaths. The even greater sadness is that without the evidence accumulated for that civil suit, we may never have known the names of these victims. Remember that the whole exercise was to recruit people into the very organisation that was currently slaughtering innocents and protesters alike in the streets of Tranent and surrounding countryside. As recruiting drives go, this wasn't the most successful. They were finding bodies in cornfields for weeks. And it was another 11 years before a militia was finally established for that county. Now, I said I had one big point that I was going to leave to the end, and I'm coming to that. But just before I do, let me tell you about the court case. On the day, 36 townspeople were taken as prisoners to Haddington and then later to Edinburgh for trial. But the only witnesses against them were the soldiers, who all gave contradictory evidence, and all the accused were released. Maybe I should have said all the survivors, because of course Jackie Crookston with the big drum had been shot dead in the street. This isn't the only time that there's been injustice and civil unrest in Scotland. In fact, at the end I've got a playlist that you can click for some other examples of unrest in Scottish society. But the thing is that none of this needed to happen. You see, the Militia Act stated that if you were selected by ballot from the list, you didn't have to join the militia. All you needed was to have enough money to pay somebody else to join a militia in your place. And that's the information I left till now. It was only the poor who had to join a militia. That's what the miners, potters, weavers and farm folk at Tranent were up in arms about. That's what the innocent dead of the 29th of August 1797 signify. And that's the searing social injustice that this video highlights. How much have things changed? You'll have to decide that for yourself. But share the story. Changed? I mean, Dawkins can be Lama alive. Cherry and Drasta.
Thanks, Dan. Thank you. Correct now, yeah. Rather grim, isn't it? It isn't, is it? Oh! Huh.
Most folks don't realise that there's one Christmas that so defines Scotland. We're still arguing about it today. If you're interested in the people, places and events in Scottish history, then click the subscribe button at the bottom right of the screen. And if you enjoy this video, then give it a thumbs up, share it, and watch the next one. In the meantime, let me tell you a story. Christmas. It's eating, it's drinking, it's celebrating. It's playing games. It's presents for little kids. It's going through age-old rituals. And it's been like that for hundreds of years. I know what you're thinking. There were centuries in Scotland where we didn't celebrate Christmas, and that's what this video is about. Well, I have made a video about that, but no. Way back in time, before Reformation or Presbyterian Orthodoxy, was a Christmas that's had more impact in Scotland than possibly any other. Wee Sandy's just turned 10. He should be all excited for Santa coming, putting out biscuits for Rudolph and a glass of whiskey for Father Christmas. That'll really be drunk by his dad. The problem is, Sandy's dad's dead. He died a couple of years ago, not long before Sandy's 8th birthday. That's when wee Sandy became Alexander III, King of Scots. If it's going to be a definitive Scottish Christmas, it makes sense that there should be a child monarch. Scotland's history has been shaped by child monarchs. Malcolm IV, David II, James I, James II, James III, James IV, James V, Mary Queen of Scots, James VI. Now, one of the constants of competitors fighting to control child monarchs in their minority reign is instability, factional fighting and chaos. That's Scottish. The thing is, wee Sandy should be looking forward to a 10-year-old boy's Christmas. But because he's Alexander III, he's going to spend Christmas getting married. When I tell you what led up to this wedding, you'll start to see why this was such a definitive Christmas.
That's Edinburgh, by the way.
It's 1251. Alexander's dad, also called Alexander, but the second, was a penultimate king in the Canmore dynasty, the House of Dunkeld. Now, these guys have been obsessed by laying claim to the north of England. You've probably heard of the new castle that was built on the River Tyne. It was built as a Norman defence against Canmore invasion. Well, in 1244, Daddy Alexander had been in Newcastle, not invading this time, but agreeing a peace treaty with Henry III of England. There had been a bit of fisticuffs on the border. A border whose line had been agreed by these same two men 7 years before and remains to this day. Now, one of the terms of the Treaty of Newcastle was that wee Sandy would marry Henry III's daughter Margaret. They were 3 and 4. The idea was to resolve Anglo-Scottish conflict once and for all. Spoiler alert.
It didn't work.
It didn't.
Not at all.
What nobody had expected was that Daddy Alexander would die 5 years later. Now, when he died and he left his 7-year-old son as heir, England's Henry petitioned the Pope saying that the Scottish king was Henry's vassal, so couldn't be crowned without English permission. And the Pope should treat Scotland as belonging to Henry. The Pope said, "Your ma!" Obviously, he said it in Latin. But if Henry couldn't get Scotland by papal confirmation, he always had the children's marriage. So, now 10 years old, Alexander was heading south for a medieval Christmas wedding. And the most defining Christmas in Scottish history. Normally, Scottish kings would hold a Christmas court at places like Scone or Roxburgh, or here at Dunfermline.
Scone is part of Perth. They nicked her stone. It's called the Stone of Destiny, by the way. Use our stone back, you English bastards. We didn't get it back until the 70s. Oops. So we got it back in 96. Christ almighty, I forgot about that student heist in 1950. There we go. Taking our stone. Fucking bastards.
Not this year. When the little Scottish king crossed the border, he was accompanied by 600 Scottish knights. The great and the good of the kingdom were heading for Henry III of England's Christmas court at York. It had been months in the planning. There had been hunting and hawking. 830 deer, 200 boar, 1,300 hares, 115 cranes, 125 swans, 290 pheasants.
Well, technically, we don't have our own foreign policy. We do what the American government says. I don't like that situation. We're a sovereign country. We should make our own foreign policy. Probably still be dog shit. But at least it'll be chosen by the British government, not the Americans. Fun times, everyone. Fun times.
And 2,100 partridges and pear trees would make up the sumptuous feasting. Nobility were coming from near and far to munch mince pies flavoured with spices and drink wine and ale. Those 600 Scottish knights would join with 1,000 English knights. The entertainment would be top-notch, the feasting would be lavish, the pomp and ceremony would be
it is beyond reproach.
Ceremonial and pompous. Anyone who's anyone would be there. And everything had to be right. Henry III took a personal interest. His daughter was to be married, and the arrangements and planning for the ceremonials would be just as detailed and meticulous as the negotiations of the marriage had been. The ceremony was to be held in York Minster. Of course, this wasn't the first attempt at Anglo-Scottish reconciliation by nuptials. Wee Sandy's dad, Alexander II, had got married in the same building. That was 30 years ago to Henry's sister. Unfortunately, they didn't really get on. They had no children, and Joan died early. Wee Alexander was the product of his dad's second marriage, and they were having a go at that same dynastic union a generation later. Now, everything hung on the success of this 1251 Christmas wedding. Now, the wedding was to be held on Boxing Day, but there was a big ceremony to be held on Christmas Day itself. If a princess was going to marry, then she should surely marry a knight. As I say, nothing was being left to chance. So, on Christmas Day, the young Alexander III would be knighted by his soon-to-be father-in-law, Henry III of England. Significantly, he had to go to England to do it. He'd also have to pay homage to the king for Huntingdon, the lands Alexander held in England. But negotiations had made clear there would be no explicit surrender of Scotland's sovereignty. Henry had other ideas. If he got this little 10-year-old to give an oath of homage for all his lands, then Scotland would be his as well. Overlordship of Scotland was an eternal cat and mouse game English kings had been playing for a while. Aethelstan with Constantine II, William the Conqueror with Malcolm Canmore at Abernethy. Most recently, Henry II with William of Scotland held hostage, imposed the Treaty of Falaise before Scotland bought itself out with a big bag of cash for Richard the Lion's crusade. Now Henry III's plan for the festivities was that a wee laddie would give a grown man a Christmas gift. Scotland wrapped in a bow. Now, if you'd like to give somebody you love Scotland for Christmas, then why not get them a ticket for my stand-up show, Scotland Made the World? What do you mean you didn't know I was touring a stand-up show? Look, this is the perfect last-minute gift for a patriotic Scottish person. I'll have shows across Scotland, across Canada, and in London in 2026. So click the link top right or in the description below, or go to my website at www.brucefumi.co.uk.
You're still in like that, Bruce. Christ almighty.
So on Christmas Day 1251, Alexander III of Scotland, the boy king, knelt before Henry III of England. Nowadays, being dubbed as a knight is something that you get for being good at football. Man, doing a couple of charity dinners. But it originated from masters giving vassals weapons in preparation for battle and evolved with ritual, duty and chivalric tradition. But there remained that sense of the person being knighted owing fealty to the man knighting him. A grown man being knighted would have a sense of duty to the one knighting him. Even more so because you've come to his northern power base. You're on his lands. Tomorrow, this man will be your father-in-law. Hundreds of people are watching. Some are your advisors. Some are folks who want to be your advisors. They are competing to control you. They've been arguing amongst themselves for years, and they will do. One has married your mother and now seeks to legitimise their illegitimate children, jostling for power, some kowtowing to Henry, the man who stands over you. Think of that. Then put yourself in the mind of a 10-year-old boy. How do you feel, little one? You're kneeling as this man towers above you. In the tension, amidst the splendour, Henry adds to the pressure. Now you've done homage for your lands that you hold from me in England. You should do so for Scotland as well. This will be the most defining Christmas in Scotland's history. This was always part of Henry's plan. Would you have had the nerve of this 10-year-old boy? He'd been taught to be wary of the King of England and calmly answered, "I came into England on a joyful and peaceful errand. I came to marry the English princess, not to talk of affairs of state. I cannot and will not speak of so important a matter without the advice of my lords and nobles." The next day, Alexander was married. Then, with all the feasting and festivities of Christmas over, Alexander came back to Scotland, taking his queen with him.
What is happening?
To play in the sandpit.
Oh,
The greed of English kings for Scotland would continue through the centuries. But on Christmas Day, 1251, a 10-year-old's refusal to be cowed.
Hang on, I'll do my standard introduction. Hello, I am MadCat79 Scotty and Katie Marshall 4340 on YouTube. I'm a Scottish disabled Marxist streamer. I talk about health and disability and benefits and history, especially Scottish history and politics. Welcome. Hello. I'm a Marxist and an eco-socialist, so I'm a left-winger.
Define Scotland's future.
You're welcome.
You see, if he'd paid homage for Scotland, then a precedent would have been set. Cross-border relations were good during Alexander's reign. He and his English queen grew up together.
Ooh. Ideally, none of the unionist parties. I am Scottish. I don't know how it's going to turn out. A good indicator will be what's going to happen in May, the Holyrood and Senate elections, which I will be covering, well, the Scottish ones. It'll be fun to see. I'm hoping that Labour and the Tories and Reform get booted. They get a bloody nose, essentially. Metaphorically, of course. No violence, please. But yeah, come back to me after the May elections, and I might be able to give you a better idea. But yeah, waiting in the wings is Manfrog and his band of merry fucking lunatics. For more on that, check out Political Custard. They have playlists for the councillors that Reform control, and they're an absolute shit show. So it's probably going to be Reform. Ugh. The Tories are politically dead, really? Politically and electorally dead. Long time coming. Who would I like to win, the Green Party? Or your party if they can get their shit together? Plenty of time before the next general election, obviously. It has to be held by 2029. I think it'll be called before that. Because this Labour government seems to be in a bit of a disarray. Who'd have thunk it? Lying to the electorate. Believe a manifesto if you want to. Oh, I haven't believed a manifesto for fucking years. I'm cynical and jaded. I'd like to see the Green Party winning a lot more seats. Your party, if they can get their shit together. Independent. Labour might win some seats, but they'll probably get done in. Because the legislation they're pursuing is absolutely crap. I hate it. He's principled. He's got a wealth of experience. He's been in Parliament since '83. He knows how the system works because he's been in it for 42 years at this point, 43 next year. So it's a wealth of knowledge. Like I say, if they can get their shit together, it might be a good force. I'm a bit salty because I'm a Scottish Green Party member, and the Glasgow branch, there's been a few defections to your party, and I'm still a bit salty about it. So it was 3 councillors and 2 organisers, essentially, in the branch that I'm a member of. So, it's leaving a bad taste in my mouth, really, with your party. But if they get their shit together, they might actually be quite decent. Challenge Labour on the left. Black man! Oh dear God. That probably won't do well. I can't remember why you left Reform. Joining your party is one way to shoot yourself in the foot. Yeah. I tend to agree with you, John. Oh no, that the Ben Habib's the mental. Ugh. I'd wish him luck, but he probably doesn't stand any fucking chance. I don't know if he's got many party members. It would be rather funny, wouldn't it, Black Man? How old is he anyway? He's probably not got long left. God almighty. Fucking hell, he's 95. He looks like a puppet. Yeah. Hopefully cancer gets manfolk first. Can you imagine that as our Prime Minister? Dear God, just end me now. Christ almighty. You're looking rather ancient there, George, aren't you?
They visit England several times as adults. Once, shortly after her dad Henry III died, Queen Margaret's brother ascended to the English throne. At this new English king's coronation, Alexander again paid homage for English lands, but refused to pay homage for Scotland. 4 years later, this English king put even greater pressure on Alexander. But the King of Scots retorted, "No one has the right to homage for my kingdom of Scotland save God alone, and I hold it only of God." Of course, this new English king who pressed for overlordship of Scotland had been at his sister's Christmas wedding in York Minster 23 years before. As a 12-year-old, he'd watched the 10-year-old Alexander refuse his father homage for Scotland, and Alexander refused him now. The name of that new English king was, of course, Edward Longshanks. Margaret predeceased Alexander, but when Alexander broke his neck falling from a horse and lay dead,
Stay hydrated. Self-care is good care. Take meds if you need to take any. Stay based. Free Palestine. And I'll catch you later. Night Ghost. Oh, by the way, that's one of my favourite bands, by the way. Ghost. Love them.
dead, not far from here, Longshanks pressed once more, this time with extreme violence. But when he invaded Scotland, this was one of the few places that he treated with reverence, giving jewels to the abbey here in Dunfermline, where his sister lay buried with her husband. If Alexander had given in to pressure that Christmas of 1251, then when Alexander died, Edward's demands of overlordship would have been valid claims to an already subordinated Scotland.
Off the top of my head.
It was because of that Christmas that Scots like William Wallace, Robert the Bruce, good Sir James Douglas and many more who remain unnamed took courage from a wee 10-year-old boy who said no. You'll find many stories of Scotland's struggles with Edward and his descendants on this channel, because the defining events of that Christmas resonate right through the present day. One of those videos will be coming up on screen now. If you've enjoyed this video, then like it, share it, and watch the next one. Support the channel by clicking top right to become a Patreon member, or buy me a coffee in the description below. In the meantime, ha mi dochas can be a lamb life. Sherry and Rasta.
Quite possibly, Black Man, yeah. Hmm. Hmm. You know what? I'm feeling a little bit stiff and sore here. I think I might actually read out. Let's see who's going. Sorry, YouTube comrades. Still haven't figured it out. No. David's going. Nice home. Amy. Raptor's going. Marxism, Ricky, Nicole, Carol, JFK. Cappy's going. Three-minute poll. Do I like Mum Danny? I do like Mum Danny. Yeah. Well done, New York. I hope he does well for them. They could do with it. Yes, your last will be covering the Holyrood elections. Thursday, 7th of May, 2026. Watch this space. I'm probably going to try and end myself. Should be fun though. So that'd be the 7th and 8th. The Haunt system, the list MSPs will be getting counted from Friday onwards. So we won't get the full result probably till the weekend. So that will be the 9th or the 10th. Probably the 9th. So that will be the Saturday. Now it is. It used to be AOC. But yeah, he's probably my favourite now. Like I say, I hope he does well for New York. Carry on, Zoran. Yay. I will be keeping an eye on, don't you worry. Yeah, you have to be an American citizen, unfortunately. Anyone can run for parliament here and become the leader of a party. But yeah, you have to be an American citizen to run for president or to be put into the cabinet. Or you can get put in the cabinet, but they'll skip over you if you're not, like, say if something happens. They're like, you've got your designated survivor and everything. Yeah, have to be born. Yeah. I'm so stiff and sore. Oh. My joints are getting really bad because of the cold weather. Ugh. Stay there. Your last does not like winter. I like late spring and summer when it's warmer, usually damp as well. The damp doesn't do me well either. Yeah, he's Austrian. Yeah, he's not German. Oh. Oh, no one voted. Raptor or Cappy? Well, technically it's Shanna. Renounces Austrian citizenship, didn't he? Yeah. Brilliant bass comrade in Kev's chat called Vogel. He's Austrian. I love Vogel. He's amazing. I can't decide who to go to. Fuck it. Let's go to Raptor. Or Cappy. Cappy, let's go and say hi to Shanna. You're talking bollocks. Yeah, he wasn't far left. Just ask us leftists. We know. We do try to educate people about that. No, he's not a socialist of any description.
Department checked a well in front of the house and, quote, found no radical change in the water level in the past 5 years, end quote. The town of Hempstead Engineers Office sent maps of the area from before the house was built, but, quote, no water or streams were shown, end quote. A technical specialist named
Come on.
From the prestigious Brookhaven National Laboratory. Department checked a well in front of the house.
Remember if you like them. Go to events where people will be trying to say that nobody would.
Fair, they deserve it. They're wonderful.
I do think that advice exists on the internet right now.
I've already watched that debate.
Even if they continue to try to bully me.
Advice that you can just find on the internet in 10 seconds. I don't think that people desperately wanting for this finding
A radio house. Nothing unusual was discovered. The Long Island Lighting Company installed an oscillograph. No unusual vibrations were found. An electrician was consulted to check the house wiring for abnormalities. Everything was in order. The town of Hempstead building found the house to be structurally sound. A professor of engineering from Cooper Union, as well as a structural engineer, a civil engineer, and an electrical engineer from the Nassau County of Professional Engineers all examined the home. Their investigations did not reveal anything out of the ordinary. The plumbing was checked and a slight vibration was detected, carried by a hot water main to one of the main beams, but this was in fact in the normal range of vibrations. Neighboring homes were also checked and found to have higher vibrational levels than the Hermans. The TV antenna was even removed from the chimney, and a small crack was closed near the house's foundation to eliminate possible vibrations. This is all to say the leading scientific theories at the time were pretty extensively studied, and the available evidence was not definitive by any means. Now this has to please you. I mean, this is like, I don't know what more they could have done here.
Very thorough.
Incredibly thorough.
Which, I mean, sort of backs my belief.
Thank you, everyone. It has been awesome, as always. Stay hydrated. Self-care is good care. Take your meds if you need to take any. Stay based. Free Palestine. And laugh at your local joke of a politician.
Because they're real. Here's my thought about the whole thing. They gained nothing from this. In fact, their lives were kind of made
noticing the same
worse
thing,
by
CJ,
all of this.
now that I'm back on the desktop.
The fact that it's a 12-year-old boy, even if he was the perpetrator, I doubt he has the strength or ability to pull off any of these movements.
They
or
got
pranks.
fame, didn't they? We're talking about them till today.